Hey guys, NJ here, and we're just having a wrap up really of this Runcam 3. If you saw my part 1 video, which was purely flight footage next to the GoPro Session 5, I'll put a link in the description for that. You'll know we've kind of touched on its quality in terms of how it fares up against the Session 5. But the biggest ruse I think here is the fact that although they look very similar and there were obvious design choices here by Runcam to make people who are perhaps thinking about getting a Session 5 think heavily about getting one of these, and maybe people that already have very widely available session mounts will have not too much trouble putting one of these in. Apart from the design choices aesthetically, they really, I mean, this is a successor to the Runcam 2 and it does improve on that in every way, I have found. But is it a competitor to this? I mean, there are areas where they cross over, but it's not the same camera. They're not kind of doing the same things. As people have mentioned before, what's easy to forget is that Runcam are designing this for FPV use, and there are some pretty heavy reminders of that as soon as you start looking through the manual, and that certainly comes in the form of how much it points towards FPV use. The fact that part of the design of this, there is enough heat, whereas this camera does require some airflow, some active cooling. You can't just rely on it to be recording in a stationary kind of, or anywhere with a warm ambient temperature like the inside of a car. They quite strongly suggest you don't use it for that kind of thing, whereas although it's not really what this was designed for, you could do it without the kind of carried warnings that Runcam have for this particular camera. But as I said, you really do have to think of them as two different cameras that happen to look alike and cross boundaries in several places. But as far as we're concerned, it's about its application for FPV. And all of my footage when I fly, as you've seen, is normally I fly in the highest bit rate I can, 1080p 60 frames per second, which is kind of the benchmark these days, and 60 frames per second is really it's important now, whereas it wasn't a big thing. It was a pretty big step forward when quads started to fly with cameras that could achieve 60 frames per second, because motion just became so much nicer to watch and you get a better appreciation of speed. Everything was just a lot more fluid. So that is the limit of this camera. I think it's around a 30 megabit bit rate, 1080p 60 frames per second. We can't go any higher than that. I was hoping between the time that I received this and me doing this kind of overview here, or sort of conclusion rather, that there would be an update that maybe would explore whether there's some higher frame rate options or resolutions were going to become available, because you just never know what they're holding back on hardware wise with the software, and whether they were, once these were out in the wild and certainly past the day where these became available, I was expecting a big sort of day one software update where I might see some of those things sort of come to fruition. Sadly not. It just seems to be that there were bug fixes really, and just other sort of minor tweaks here and there. That said, what do I think of the picture? Look, I think the picture is really good, and there are instances where the Runcam 3's picture excel in areas where the GoPro does not. Some of those low light performances that low light situations, the performance has been excellent. With the wide dynamic range option on, I've seen this handle, especially if you're pointing straight at the sun and around sunset, when that puts the exposure of these cameras really get put to the test. Because you tend to have these problems with extreme lighting where it'll overexpose the sky and underexpose the ground, or vice versa. And the Runcam was it was exceptional, and it amazes me at some of the footage I look back at where I was pointing straight at the sun, even in midday sun, and you could actually see the sun perfectly round, not kind of blown out, and everything just really well illuminated. The wide dynamic range on this is excellent. So for £80 this is a bargain, without a doubt. And if budget's in mind, you haven't got the budget to stretch to one of these, or you crash and break stuff a lot and you just don't really want to, you haven't got one of those Best Buy or Currys over here in the UK, one of their insurance deals where you can get it repaired if you manage to break it. If you don't have something like that, this does kind of hurt hurt you financially a little bit less if you break it. On that topic, there is the subject of durability. Now you can see here, this is this is less than a month old, and already I'm seeing signs of wear and tear from where it's been mounted and dismounted from different quads. This I've had since the moment of release, and it is still pretty much immaculate. This kind of tough rubber casing. There is a tiny little bit of wear on the aluminium surround here, all of which is replaceable, of course, but all in all, you can tell where the extra money on the GoPro has gone in terms of construction. It is a tough cookie, and of course you have to also mention that it is waterproof. And how many of you have crashed in water? I've done it. I've only done it once, and I've never flown near water again because it hurt me a lot financially because I broke so much stuff, which was unfortunate. But that's a topic for another day. But you have the door on the GoPro, which I really love. Just protects everything, keeps it watertight, and that no matter what kind of shock the GoPro is going to get, that SD card isn't going to bounce out. Obviously the ports are open on this. There's no kind of cover for the micro USB, and at the minute, although again I hear this is going to change, so say Runcam, they have this kind of silicone door. I don't see this lasting at all. I think this is not going to be long before this is gone or being broken off or ripped off as it goes in and out of a TPU or TPE mount. That said, I did have I had quite a few crashes with this because of course in the interest of durability, not because I made any mistakes on the sticks, no. But yeah, I did crash a few times, and when I did, what I found was that the card had actually obviously shocked in and then come loose of the mechanism, but this did retain it. It was kind of poking out, but this did, on both occasions that happened, with this pressed in, it did stop the memory card coming out. So it works while it's there, but as I said, my fear is that won't be there for very much longer. But yeah, Runcam, apparently they are going to put a door on there, which I think is a very good idea. In terms of the app functionality, now I think this is worth pointing out because I do like to use the app because it's a quick and convenient way of changing settings on the camera, and I've done that a lot with GoPro. And I've got to say, I think the Runcam app, although it's still in its early days and I know there's a couple of crashes and bugs, I mean GoPro was no different, the Runcam app is considerably better. And the bit that I really like about the Runcam app, apart from the fact that the latency between what's being transmitted and what you're seeing on the screen of the app, and I'll show you this in a sec, is very low compared to the GoPro, which is like 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, which is just terrible. The one thing I really like is the fact that you can see the changes you make. We're not all camera experts, and there are some things, if you don't know on the fly how it's going to affect the environment you're in, you can change it on this and instantly see what the effect of that change is, whether you understand what you're changing or not. That's a massive plus, and I don't know why GoPro haven't gone down that route. You have to go to a settings page, flick, go back. You might, in that time, have you really noticed what's changed? It's a trickier thing to do on this. But it works really well on the app for the Runcam 3, so I think that's a really big plus. Okay, a little warning about the SD card not being in there, but that's all fine. And as you can see, as I move this, that's really good in terms of latency for these cameras wirelessly to this. This is working really well. As I said, it just annoyed the life out of me that this the GoPro, that you move the camera around, you'd have to wait 2 or 3 seconds before you'd see any kind of movement on the app. But as I was saying, the bit that I just love about this is if I want to see what the field of view change is like, for instance, I can literally tap on that field of view, so go to a narrow, and you can see instantly that's your result. If I go to the widest field of view, you again get to see that that effect straight away, which is brilliant. And this is really important when you're outside, whether you're in a cloudy environment or you're in a well lit midday perfect blue sky environment. How your white balance is going to work can affect that. I generally leave that on auto, but at least you can actually tap on the different types, whether it's sunny or cloudy. You can actually manually and very quickly change that and see the effect straight on the camera, which is absolutely brilliant. The same goes for weighting. Whether you want a kind of an average, like it says here, the average metering, whether you want to center weight it more or less, there you go, center weighted average metering, or right in the spot metering, right in the center. So being able to see these things in real time, each of these settings, I just think that works really, really well. Sadly, the only thing that is a real deal breaker for me, it's not for everyone, most people are fine with this, but for me, I really love what SuperView affords you on the GoPro Session 5, and it was on the Session 4, but it does it, a higher frame rate on the 5, and I really miss that. That's probably the biggest thing. It's much more critical that you get your up tilt angle exactly right on the Runcam 3 than it is on the Session. I mean, I've had this on my GT2 almost completely flat, where the props are well in view, and I can tilt forward and fly it and still get that great field of view vertically, and you get that really nice sensation of speed. I just think the whole SuperView thing, maybe from a more artistic point of view, but I just love the way the footage looks in SuperView on the GoPro Session 5. So you have to be a little more careful with your angles and getting that just right on the Runcam 3. So yeah, that's probably the biggest omission for me. I would love to see some kind of script that you could add in, like you could with the Yi cameras. Maybe that will come along, and I'll change my mind, and I'll be able to test that out for you. So we'll see where we go with that. And then, of course, at the minute, our maximum bitrate is 30 megabits per second, which is perfectly respectable. 1920 by 1080, so full HD at 60 frames per second, and then your other option is 1280 by 720 at 60 or 30, and then you have your different data rates. And I guess lastly, the other thing to mention, I know it sounds like I'm bringing up a lot of negatives here, but probably the biggest one for me, the audio. Although it's good if you're using it for speaking or recording other kind of audio, for FPV, which is kind of their design purpose, I can't believe they didn't do more to try and EQ or compress or experiment with different microphone types on this, because it is just horrific on a quadcopter. I mean, it will literally make your teeth hurt. It's so bad. So that's I mean, most of us, when we're putting our flight footage up, we're putting it up to music anyway, but I didn't really appreciate just how good the microphone on the Session 5 was until I listened to the audio back from running this. It is pretty much straight up nasty. But as I said, I would consider this to be a very different camera to the GoPro 5. It's an excellent FPV camera, the footage is excellent, the light handling is really a strong point, the app is a strong point. However, as I said, the lack of SuperView and high resolutions is a bit of an issue for me. The fact that they need to revise this door and do a better job of maintaining, retaining the micro SD card. There is no waterproofing, and its durability, as you can see, for something hardly old at all, is questionable. Either way, I'll keep an eye on updates and I'll let you know more as I do, but despite all the negative things I've mentioned, I actually think for the price this is an excellent camera. So if you're on the fence about getting one, it does get a thumbs up from me. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.